the topic of artistry and parenthood, and what's the connection, what's the disruption of that, of our artistic pursuits because of parenthood. Because, you know, you have a little baby and we have little babies. So I think we could speak firsthand about how that's influenced our art, or for the good or for the bad. What do you think?
Yeah, I think disruption is a wonderful word for it.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Pinedo Brothers Podcast. I'm JP, and I'm joined today not by my brother Peter, who's away for the week, but my sister Annie. Thank you for joining.
Hello.
Thanks for stepping in. You grace us with your artistic presence and your keen wit, as well as you're a lot better looking than either Peter and I, so that helps out.
Well, what can I say?
We're sold a bill of goods in the US. I can't speak for the whole world, but in the US, we're told quite clearly that get your career in order, get all, grow up, and then maybe have kids, maybe. At least that's the priority that I perceive, is start off, get that career in place, get your house in order. And then once you have that house in order, you can bring more people into the world. You can think about getting married and having kids. But what do you perceive as a young college student? What did you see was the kind of the path that was told, especially speaking from the female perspective?
Yeah, definitely was nothing to do with kids, I would say. That's what I would see in college. I feel like it was always either have a career and make a lot of money, or have a career that makes you really famous, and that kids would get in the way of that. And so some people would say, oh, well, didn't plan to get married, or if they did, well, no kids. Kids are just seen as in the way of rich and famous.
Well, you're going to college and you're in these dancing departments. And if people don't know, my sister Annie is in the major leagues of dance, especially in her chosen field of ballet folklorico. And me as a filmmaker, I look with, also considering myself as an artist, I look with great respect to Annie and what she's managed to accomplish. So I'm wondering, as you're going through the dancing programs that you've been through, what did the girls talk about when it came to motherhood, when it came to parenthood? Was that ever a mention? And if it was, what kind of light did they, asperge or place on it?
I feel like it wasn't really ever a topic, unless you happen to have one girl that happened to be a mother. And at that point, it was usually a single mother. Very, very, very seldom was it a married woman. And even then, it was more like just talking about her baby. It's not like parenthood was really ever a topic.
Interesting. So if it's not present, what did you get the sense that these dancers thought about motherhood?
That they didn't really think of it, I guess. They respected their mothers, I can say. The majority of them did. And male and female dancers would respect their mothers. But as in themselves, it'd be like, no, not for me, would be the most common thing you would hear.
So they weren't planning on being a mother?
No. Yeah. And if they were, they didn't really bring it up. I do know that a lot of my old colleagues from college, many of them are mothers now, and they seem to be quite happy with what they're doing. But many of them these ones that are mothers didn't further dance, finishing college. They stopped there. So it was, I guess, yeah, it is interesting. It was thinking about it now. It wasn't really ever a topic.
What did you think of motherhood pre being a mother, as you're going through this?
Going through this, I always knew I wanted to be a mother. I always felt like I had this paradox in my head. I couldn't figure out how I was going to be able to do both, but I knew I wanted both. And so that's why one thing with this last year, the moments I got to be on stage and dancing a solo and pregnant at the same time was kind of like, it actually happened. I knew I wanted both, and I got both. So I guess, so in the formation years, I guess it's just, I didn't know how we could work it out, but I knew I wanted it.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It makes me think, about my own side as an artistic, as pursuing a artistic endeavor in college. We're both Catholics. I guess that's the first thing that should be said. Peter and I are Catholic filmmaking brothers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art. And so Catholicism, we wear on our sleeves everywhere we go. And I get the sense that you do something similar as well through your art. I've seen some of the solos that you've created, the choreography that you do. I would venture to guess you're probably in the minority as far as how you present yourself and how you deal with your Catholic faith as it influences your art. I know I definitely was in the minority working at or going as a college student in the University of Texas at Austin, and then later being in Los Angeles. Although there were other Catholics in LA, we kind of banded together, and they're doing great things. And hopefully Peter and I are doing similar good things as well. But I'm thinking back to when we were, in college, and I get the sense that parenthood was almost, I think this is a little bit why there's so many abortions these days, and there's so much a reliance on contraception, is because parenthood is pictured very much as a mistake. It's pictured as a kind of a something that you get for your sins almost. That sort of almost puritanical look at sex and then what the sexual act brings, which is interesting because of how Austin is very much sexually progressive. It's definitely not thought of as puritanical, and yet you see some of the undercurrents that's different. Like, I really appreciate how Jordan Peterson's daughter Michaela speaks about parenthood, and saying, she had a daughter, I think it was out of wedlock, and she speaks very, very eloquently about the fact that this child was not a fatal consequence to her career, and how parenthood is something that she appreciates and doesn't see as, a millstone tied around her neck. I'm wondering where that came from, really, though. Like, is it possible that our good old puritanical forefathers, we got Thanksgiving coming up, is it possible that our good old puritanical, waspy forefathers instilled this sort of taboo on parenthood, so to speak, outside of marriage? And so what we did is we took the taboo we did away with the sex part of that taboo, where there's no taboo on sex outside of marriage, but we held on to the parenthood outside of marriage. Is that possible? Or is it just because it's difficult? Because it is difficult. It's definitely difficult, but it goes beyond that. It seems like it's almost verboten.
Yeah, it does seem to see that way. I wonder, you bring up a good point there. I feel like maybe that could be where it comes from, because I think but also adding to it, maybe not that we've completely taken away the taboo of sex, but the thing is, if someone becomes pregnant, then there's no hiding what they did. And so it kind of brings to light whatever they did. So that's when it shows, the great sin, right?
But we talk about our sexual, well, I mean, I don't, or I didn't, but at least in my field, people were very openly talking about their sexual conquests.
But were they open to their mother and father and grandmother?
I don't know.
Because I don't think they could hide it with a pregnancy from that.
I don't know. I don't know.
And then I guess it just makes me think that with our Catholic perspective, of course, we have a completely different idea, right, of children. And that makes, I guess it, like being a Catholic makes you able to realize so much more that you're capable of, that it doesn't, it's not like it's the end of the world having a child. There's now so much more you're able to do, maybe in a different way. But that idea of welcoming life as a blessing completely changes an artist's perspective.
So let's dive into that. Tell me so you told me what your perspective was before having a child, about how you said, I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but I want to do it. What is your perspective now of parenthood now that you are one?
Well, being one, definitely it's hard. Yeah. But it's wonderful. And it can, being a parent can, well, you have to figure out new ways maybe to do. It's not as easy to go and rehearse and go and choreographed as it was before. But now, if everything that you do is, let's say, your perspective, now there's like a whole new idea of life because it's in front of you. And that can add a whole new level into like in the art that I create and the art I do. And of course, her being very little, just a baby right now, it's not that I've delved into it so much, but I feel like there's so much untapped potential that I'm getting into right now at this point. So, yeah, I always been inspired by, I've always followed the few ballerinas, the classical ballerinas that have children, because there aren't so many, like in every professional company out there. The majority probably don't have kids, but there are a few. And the work they create in their perspective was always very inspiring to me. Mm-hmm. And one in particular that I find her to be a beautiful dancer, that she posted this one video, and it's gorgeous the way it's her dancing a couple dance in classical ballet, point shoes and all. And she says, they told me, a very wise ballerina once told me that after having a child, everything would change. Everything would mean so much more. And she was right. And then you can feel the emotion in this one little video of her dancing for just, 20 seconds. And so that's how I feel right now, and I want to be able to show that. So that's where
I feel something very similar, actually. I think that I'm say something a little bold here. I think if you're an artist, and you should, before you create too much, because your stuff is going to be, your creations are going to be so drastically changed and influenced by these two things that I'm about to say. I don't think you should create much. Maybe you can get the technical skills down, but after you have a life that's completely dependent upon you and your spouse, if you're lucky enough to have a spouse, you don't see the world the same way. It's like, why would you create? It's almost like you're a toddler beforehand. Like, why would you create something that seems so almost disconnected from what actually matters when you don't have any idea? There's no way you can draw into that connection. Unless, of course, I think another good option is you really want to have children and then you're not able to, which you draw into that great sorrow. Tolkien speaks very eloquently about how the pain and the sadness influences, there's a beauty to it. That deep sorrow that pierces the soul is a great driver of artistic expression. So I think one of those two things is prerequisite, really, of most artists being able to create, either experiencing a life that's dependent upon you and what that means, and seeing this little life grow, and being responsible, partially at least, for bringing that life into the world, is something that experience. I mean, how can you speak about life as an artist if you haven't experienced that, or if you haven't had the desire to experience it, because your desires seem so small and insignificant until you have. I guess then I would answer, I would pose an objection. Well, what about, people like the priests who have created all those beautiful things, and the nuns? Like, one of my favorite artists is Hildegard of Bingen, who's an incredible artist, but never experienced what I'm talking about. Although maybe she experienced the desire. Maybe I'm answering my objection. Priests still have the desire for fatherhood. They have they have many spiritual children. I can't imagine what that is like. Obviously, I guess I have godchildren, but it's still not the same thing. But maybe that desire for fatherhood influences the art that these wonderful clerics have been able to create. I'm not sure. What do you think of it all?
That's a weighty question there. I'm not so sure what to say about it. I feel like it kind of comes to, I guess, what it is, like where an artist's head is directed, kind of thing. Because you get, as you said, many lay people, well, not lay people, but clerics or people who haven't had children that make beautiful art. Maybe it has to do with trying to show life and their want for life and the beauty of life. Not so sure what so much to say your point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I have a hard time really drawing circles around artistic expression and saying who should express or who should not. I think the point really is that from my own experience, so we're speaking very, very in a very small scale here, in the micro level. From my own experience, yes, being a parent is difficult. It's more difficult than I thought it would be. And it's probably going to become increasingly difficult as God, thanks be to God, the family grows. But just because something is difficult doesn't mean that it's not worth doing, obviously. Mm-hmm. Generally, there's a reciprocal relationship between difficulty and things that are worth doing, actually. Mm-hmm. So you can't say, well, you shouldn't do something because it's difficult, when you realize that difficult things are really the only things worth doing. So there goes with that. So go ahead.
I wonder, though, it might have to do with your point you're bringing up with the journey of each individual artist. Because you and I, we weren't bad artists before we had children, or other artists that have children. But in their particular journey as a person, as an artist, having children brought in a new, deeper meaning that since they are artists, they were able to show through their work. Mm-hmm. And so I think people who don't have children and never do, they know they go through their own journeys throughout life, and that's what they portray throughout their work. So not that someone who's a parent is a better or worse artist, but you're able to be an artist even if you are a parent.
Yeah. Well, not just that you are able to, but that, I mean, I would say that experience. Okay. They told us in college that you shouldn't just create something when you haven't experienced anything. You should go out and, see the world and experience that. Well, what's the most meaningful experience that most of us normal people are able to have is being a parent. So if experience deepens your capability of artistic expression, then maybe you should consider being a parent, because
hey, I like that one.
That definitely deepens your experience, your experiential knowledge of the world. You become a more, what is it? It's like it's definitely refined in fire, but you experience this deep emotional, how can you say it? Like when you're up at night and the child is screaming, you don't really know what that's like. Like, I don't know what to do here. This is like really difficult. I haven't slept any. I'm going to have to work the next day. I don't know what to do here. And yet, then in that next instant, the little guy smiles at you and you're like, oh, okay, it's all right. There's this weird, it's like your old spirit is getting removed, it's getting torn up, and you're building up something that's different. And if you're really mindful with what you're trying to do, well, that is, making this little relationship something that you value and treasure, this little person that you value and you treasure, then you become a deeper individual. You become more multifaceted. The less go ahead.
It's just interesting though, because going back kind of to where we started this whole conversation at is that the world and even your professors in college tell you the opposite of this. You're saying everyone says you kind of get the mentality out there that experience all you can before you have kids, because once you have them, your life is over, which is not true at all. And it's a whole different experience. And that a lot of people are missing out by avoiding having children or unfortunately aborting them. And but the world, why don't people realize how much of a greater experience and how much it can help your art in a way? Help isn't quite the right word. Yeah.
Well, really what I'm coming away with is the greater realization that we have such an abortive culture. Like that's something that we're spoon-fed very early, is like, yeah, what you just said. Make sure that you do everything you can do, see the world and, nurture your career and buy your house and grow your bank account, because once you get that kid, everything is over. Well, you know what? You don't need all that fancy stuff anyway, like you can survive very, like, we're really blessed to live in the United States. We're really blessed to live in Texas, where HEB, it doesn't take that much money to support a family at HEB. It's pretty amazing. And then most people are lucky enough also to have family that supports their growing family, extended family, I mean. So if you have that support system, your life really isn't over. Now, is it more difficult? Yes. I keep on coming back to it because I don't want to make some sort of like, Pollyanna view of parenthood here. But I want to point out that when you no longer have your control of your time, then you can become more mindful of how you spend that time.
Definitely.
And then when you no longer have the disposable income that you might have or the freedom to go do without your income, then I think as an artist, this is something I've experienced very closely. You are less inclined to waste time on artistic projects that are A, not meaningful to you, or B, not expedient to bringing in money. You become a much more choosy artist, which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, there's so many projects out there that people want us to be a part of that are really not worth it. So I was already pretty choosy to begin with, but I look back in some of my projects that I've done. I'm like, well, I'm not sure how worthwhile that was, but I did it anyway. I'm not saying that I'm going to tear anything up, but at the same time, every single time I'm able to do something artistically, it's much more you take that for you appreciate that more. You're like, okay, well, I only have this precious little amount of time, so let me try and do as much as I can with that precious little amount of time that I have,
and that what I do be worthwhile.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. You definitely hope for it to be worthwhile. But tell me, what do you think? I guess there's something that I've been struggling with. I want to see what you think. I really like Jordan Peterson's idea about focusing on one thing and getting it and becoming an expert in it. And I know we're running short of time, so I want to try to close pretty soon. So make this the last question at least. And I like that. I think that's a good idea. I think to focus on one thing and become an expert at it, it makes good sense to me, good common sense. Peterson is, I think, the closest connection we have to a sort of Chestertonian apostle of common sense in the modern day. So tell me, if that's good, if that's a good idea, and someone like me who has, the day job that I work very hard at, and I do a really good job at that day job, and we have a family that's growing that needs attention, and that day job thankfully supports that growing family. And then we have, that precious little amount of time to work on art that is still very meaningful, because if anything, it's more meaningful now. But then what about that focus, because we have to be such generalists, if it's just us creating, with our own little, our own little family, the own little Pinedo brother family, or our Pinedo sibling family, you have to do everything, don't you? Like you need to be the writer, you need the producer, you need to be the director, you need to do all the different things, which I'm happy to do, but at the same time, it's not that same devotion to one thing and getting it done. So I feel a little bit at odds there. Do you have any insight am I making a mountain out of a molehill, or is there some sort of adjustment I can make?
Well, I kind of feel like with your different things that you do, that you have the podcast and any other projects that you're trying to work on, don't you have a common goal though that you're going for with these?
Mm-hmm.
So we could say, in a way, that's one thing that you're working towards. So maybe it's one thing, but there's different ways to work at it to get there. And when you said that, work on one thing and choose one thing and do it well, the first thing that came to mind to me is just my personal artistic process. Yes. Because let's say if I want to learn this one dance really well because something's just not coming out right. I mean, I can dance it, but I'm not getting the expression I want. I have to throw on some headphones and close my eyes and listen to the song over and over. And it's like, basically, I feel like I have to live that role to be able to get that expression that I'm hoping for, or maybe not just, a dance I'm trying to learn, but a choreograph I want to make. And I'm not saying that like, okay, now this is me, living my life as believing I'm Batman 24/7. No, it's, the moments that I have for trying to work on art that you really focus in on this particular topic. And so his phrase makes sense to me in that way. Because like, if you were to think, if you only have so much time, you can maybe decide on, this is what I can get done now, and I'm going to throw my head into this one. So I would say his phrase, I'd use it in that way, kind of to use bit by bit, and maybe it can all go towards one overall project. And it might be today I have to do it this way, and tomorrow I have to go out and write. But in the end, it's because I want to get to an end of this whole project that has many, many different angles and many different parts to it. Mm-hmm. It's more, I feel like it's a suggestion of it's an idea of how to order your time.
Mm-hmm. 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 That makes sense to me. That makes complete sense. And I think, yeah, the one thing, because I was thinking about it very practically, like, okay, get really good at writing, for example, and don't focus on the other stuff, just write. But maybe it works for some artists, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily have to be a singular thing like that. It could be an idea. It could be a particular goal that you have, that it involves you working a lot of different tasks. So the question, I think, for me is clarify what that one goal is, or that one project is, and then let everything get organized around that. not necessarily the one skill, but the skills organize themselves around the goal. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much.
That makes sense. That makes really good sense. What are I know I said one last thing, but let's close with this. What are your struggles now that you're looking at as an artist? So if there are young artists that are out there that maybe are parents or maybe are not, maybe they're aspiring dancers, maybe they're aspiring filmmakers or writers. What are some parting thoughts you can have? Maybe speak personally about things that you're either working through or struggling with, or give us some parting thoughts.
Well, one thing is that it is difficult, but just because it's difficult doesn't mean that you can't do it. And sometimes you might have to, it depends on your particular situation. Sometimes maybe that thing you want to do at the moment, because of whatever's going on in your child's life, might have to go on pause, but that doesn't mean it's going to be the end. It doesn't mean being a parent doesn't mean that your life is over and you can't have any pursuits of your own. And then I guess the biggest thing is that when it feels difficult, that's okay. And maybe have patience with yourself. Have patience with the fact that your time isn't your own. And the biggest one with yourself, because I think that's the biggest thing that I'm struggling with myself, wanting to be able to do things differently, but I feel like it can all come together if you have the patience to let time help you put it together. Of course, God.
That's great. And I would my last parting thing, I would say, I love that. That's perfect. The patience with yourself. Something I'm taking out of this for myself is I want to be on more of a lookout when we are faced with that sort of anti-parenthood mentality, that sort of throw away your life. Once you have a child, it throws away your life. Maybe be on the lookout for that. Because it's mentioned so casually so many times, like you said, our professors brought it up all the time.
It's like how many people out there really believe that children are a blessing, with that idea of children as a blessing rather than a mistake or an accident or the end. Then it gives you, that can change the mentality a whole lot. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, that's good. It can change the mentality. I like that. I'll internalize that of try not to, as a parent, complain too much, at least in public, about. But I guess the point that I would say is that we can be more outspoken about how, hey, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. This is not something that we should be continually saying how terrible it is. We can point out that being a parent is actually a privilege. There's a lot of people that aren't able to be parents. And I think that desire, like I said, is a very refining fire, that desire that's been thwarted, at least for the time being. So maybe that just pointing out the awesome nature of new life coming into the world, and then being that new life looking to you as mommy or daddy is pretty amazing. I would say the one thing that I did not expect to love nearly as much as I love is hearing our little almost 2-year-old say, "Daddy, Daddy." I love it. And I think if I could wish any blessing on anyone, it would be for all the listeners that we have right now, being able to hear that. If they're a young woman, hopefully they hear mommy. And if they're a young man, get to hear daddy, because it's worth it. It's worth the price of admission to hear that show. So in any case, shall we leave it there for now?
Sounds good.
Great. All right. Well, Annie, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of the Pinedo Brothers podcast. I guess this time we'll call it the Pinedo Siblings podcast. Peter and I are Catholic filmmaking brothers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art. And we hope that you can check out some of our work at pinedobrothers.com. I think you'll enjoy what you see. Annie, where can they look up your work?
Mostly through my Instagram, I guess.
What's your Insta handle? Or I'll post it in the description. How about that? You send it to me.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right, everyone. Have a great day, and thanks again.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pinedo Brothers Podcast, an artist podcast for Catholics. We hope you enjoyed it, and if so, please consider subscribing, and commenting below. That really helps. This episode was edited and recorded by me, JP. Makeup was done by no one, if you couldn't tell. For more information on us, check us out at pinedobrothers.com. Thanks again.